Good morning.
Hey guys,
I'm Graham,
I'm Daniel.
and we're not so critically acclaimed. We're just two regular guys that love watching movies. We're pretty fed up with the current systems like Rotten Tomatoes and other movie reviews out there that are pretty subjective and really inconsistent. We're here to change that.
We watch these movies together generally, but we don't talk about it until now. So y'all are getting the live feed of us discussing this for the first time.
And we're not watching these in theaters or anything. This is literally, we're roommates. We have a living room with a 60-inch TV, Blu-ray player, and surround sound. That's it. Nothing too fancy, but a really good setup.
And another thing, before I kick off this review, is we like doing controversial movies because there's so much emotional distance with those movies. People say they love it, they hate it. We got movies like Her. You got classics like Clockwork Orange. People that are so divisive. And especially that new movie Mother, which we're actually going to watch and review. So we're going to start off today with Prisoners. And Prisoners is probably, and I think both of us have already talked about this much, one of our favorite nail-biting thrillers
Absolutely.
that we've ever seen. And this is a movie by Denis Villeneuve. How do you say his name?
Villeneuve?
Villeneuve? Villeneuve?
Well, I guess we'll never know.
Crap. Well, anyway, whoever this guy is, he's the director of the newest movie, Arrival. He's making the Blade Runner sequel. He made Enemy, a little more under-the-radar film, and he also made Sicario. This movie is called Prisoners for a reason. And I thought about this right after watching the movie, and this is the third time I've seen it, and it's pretty obvious. It's not about the girls getting kidnapped. This movie is called Prisoners because Jake Gyllenhaal and Hugh Jackman, who both absolutely destroy this role, are prisoners of their own ambition. And I think the director in this movie is trying to show that Gyllenhaal's a guy who's never, we're told in the beginning, he's never unsolved a case. Hugh Jackman is a guy who has a bunker of supplies in his basement for any attack. And the only problem I had with this movie was this wasn't a flaw of the characters and it wasn't a strength, because in my opinion, I didn't think Hugh Jackman had to be a prisoner of protecting his family to do what he did. I thought he did the right thing regardless of that concept. And I'm not sure what the director was trying to say with that.
Yeah.
And I've got a few problems with how that drive of the movie, how these two characters are the tension between them because they're both prisoners of their own ideals, concludes. And I'm just curious, what were your thoughts on that concept?
Interesting. So our rule is that we're not allowed to talk about anything about this movie until we actually turn on the camera. So this is the first time I've heard him say anything like this. Wow. Okay. That's a little out there, man. I didn't even think about that at all. So
I'm sure I'm not the only person
concept.
to have this.
Yeah, totally new concept in my mind. See, I more view the title as when you're wondering what's going on at the beginning of the movie, it's like you're guaranteed to know. I'm sure there's a double entendre behind it, whatever. But you're guaranteed to know that these little girls get kidnapped. It's like, and that someone will be a prisoner at some point in the movie. And it's not like they just ran away and they're going to come back. It's like someone's being held captive is what that means to me.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a little
I take
bit.
a more straightforward, interpretation to the title, but I think you offer an interesting perspective there, Daniel.
I think the scene that really got it for me is I don't think it deserved that title until Jake Gyllenhaal goes in the basement and sees all of his stuff down there. And then I started to be like, this guy actually is a little, well, I agree with what he's doing. He's a little bananas.
Yeah.
Little
wacky.
And Gyllenhaal, in that scene where they're interrogating the guy, he gets so pissed that he grabs the dude grabs a gun and kills himself. And those two scenes I thought kind of clinched that idea. But I love what you said about the title and the way you took it, because this is actually where I'm comparing it to Sicario. So from the very beginning of this movie, we have this unrelenting tension. We know that these girls have been kidnapped. There's no question about it. They didn't run away. We know. Just the movie is so tense and dark, and that's what Villeneuve does. His movies are so just eerie, and this movie's almost ominous. There's no question about it, and the dread of that carries the tension through the entire movie. And I thought a movie like Sicario had that dread in the intro, but when they went to Juarez, I thought it kind of lost some of that. What are we supposed to be dreading with these wide pan shots when nothing else is really going on? In this movie, there was so much that had already happened that I was fretting the entire time because there's no release of that dread.
I also like in Prisoners, I think we should kind of shy away from Sicario and comparing other movies.
You're right.
But I think that's a very good point. But I think in Prisoners, I mean, it is so tight-knit. You have basically Jake Gyllenhaal, Hugh Jackman, and then Cuba Gooding Jr., and then like their immediate circles. And all that to say, it's a really tight-knit, very close. You can get emotionally attached to these characters because there are so few, is really what we're getting at, is that, you know, they really develop these two families and this inspector so much so that you just, like, empathize with them even if you've never experienced anything like it.
Absolutely, and one thing that this director does amazing is there's no characterization given to these characters until they start reacting to the events. So we don't know anything about Hugh Jackman's character other than a Thanksgiving dinner. We don't know anything about him until he starts reacting to the way his daughter's been kidnapped. And I think that's one of the things that this director does so well is he develops these characters through the way they react to this trauma. We don't know anything about their backstory other than little things we're told.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that he absolutely just kills in this movie it's the way these characters react and the choices they make. It's not so much an intricate plot. It's more about the layers of the humans' emotions and how they react. And I think that's one of the best things about the movie.
Yeah, so I think, the writer's name is Aaron Guzikowski, okay? He does a phenomenal job of adding depth to the emotion by adding religion into it.
Yeah.
So Hugh Jackman's character, like, clearly has a huge Christian influence. There's crosses everywhere. Everyone in his family is wearing a cross necklace.
Oh yeah.
You know, there's also the sex offender priest.
Disturbing scene.
Yeah, a very, very disturbing character. And then there's also, you know, at the beginning, the movie, literally the first scene starts out with the Lord's Prayer.
Oh yeah, and they tie that in perfectly.
And they tie it in perfectly because you hear Hugh Jackman quoting it throughout. You start to see that, and he just kind of crumples against the wall and starts, you know, crying and basically just praying. And he gets to the part in the Lord's Prayer where he says, "Forgive us for our trespasses as we forgive those." And he kind of like cuts off, and he can't even say it, you know, because he knows that he can't forgive this guy.
And I love the way the faith theme drives the movie too, because I love it when he is shoved into that hole and he's down there and he, you know, I think he finds the whistle and he's pinned up against the wall and he starts praying. And I love how, like, right after that woman was like, you know, we do this to wage war against God and to make people lose their faith. You know, he's in this hole and he's still desperately praying. And I liked how they tied in the religious themes, him not being able to reconcile that Lord's Prayer. It even brought more tension to the film. And they did it in a way that did not bother me.
Yeah, no,
at
like,
all.
Yeah, it didn't feel overly, you know, pushy in any way, shape, or form. They tied it in, like, subtly and flawlessly.
We even understood the guy who killed the guy in the basement. Like, this dude came and confessed that he had been kidnapping girls.
Yeah, and
so
he had to do something about it, and
he really wasn't that messed up of a character. At first, you think he's kind of a creepy character, but you know, for the most part, he's not. And one thing I think we should talk about.
Still a registered sex offender, though.
Oh, he was. That's right. That's why they went there. I'm sorry. Scratch what I said.
Creepy dude.
Still creepy guy. My bad. So one thing that I want to talk about real quick before we talk about the torture is the cinematography. You got the same guy who filmed Skyfall, Sicario, I believe he's done some other work since then, but I'm actually going to have to look it up. But anyway, those are beautifully shot movies, wide pan, looming shots. From the very first scene in the movie where the father and the son are hunting, you got this slowly edging back towards them, and I think it fits perfectly with this film. It's almost like someone's kind of watching from the outside, like someone's kind of creepily. It's like the camera's almost creepy the way it's filmed.
And I think that adds another element
Of tension,
of emotional attachment from the audience, is that we feel like we're that person that's with them, watching them.
Absolutely.
And that cinematography kind of portrays that exceptionally well.
Absolutely, it's one of my favorite, from just a cinematography standpoint, choreographed movies I think I've seen. And crap, where was I going with that? I mean, this guy kills every movie he's in, but I think it goes best with this movie because I'm never bored and a shot never lingers too long. And there's so much dread that those wide pan shots don't linger on me. They almost just create more suspense and anticipation instead of boredom.
Yeah.
Which I think
it doesn't slow down the movie pace at all.
absolutely not. And that's a big thing because he has been criticized for doing that in other films.
Yeah.
And I think it was perfect for this movie.
I think so as well. So there's an interesting point that or something that happened while we were watching it. We had to pause it like 40 minutes in, and I don't know, like
2 hours.
Somebody had to go back. Whatever. Anyway, so we had to pause it like 40 minutes in, and we realized that we still had 2 hours to go.
Yeah.
And we were like, dude, this movie is going to take forever. And then immediately it ended. It was like, I think that I was just sweating and so emotional in this movie that it
flew by.
It flew by. It's crazy.
It's one of the fastest moving 2.5-hour movies I've ever seen, if not the fastest.
The fastest 2.5-hour movie. Wow.
I mean, you got movies like The Dark Knight, which fly by, but this movie was just every scene so tense that I feel like that can make a movie longer.
Yeah.
But this movie feels like a 90-minute movie. It almost feels like it wraps up short, which is incredible.
So I really want to talk about the acting.
Yeah.
I think Hugh Jackman, this is one of his best performances. Like I love, Hugh Jackman in a lot of things. Not really when he's singing, but I think he's great.
Still pretty good.
And decent. And then I think he does one of his best performances in this movie.
Absolutely.
If not the best, because he's so unbelievable, like at portraying this like anger and just obsession with finding his daughter, protecting his family.
Yeah.
And it's just one of the most believable things. Like I don't believe that. Like I don't think of Hugh Jackman as I don't think of like Wolverine as some angry father in this movie. I think of like, wow, this guy is just passionate about finding his daughter. And
absolutely.
Just so believable.
And it's the worst case for this guy because this guy has spent his life convincing his family that he will do whatever he can to protect them, and he is helpless in this situation. And you buy every ounce of that anger that he has. I think he should have been nominated for an Oscar.
I think so
performance.
too. Dude, I think that I think one of the hardest moments that it kind of soaks in that he's supposed to be protecting his family, or that he's promised he's protecting his family, is that his wife is just like bawling on the bed, and he gives her medication. She's like, I can't sleep, I can't do anything, and she's just in pure misery. And she rolls over on the bed and faces away from him and says, I don't remember. She says, "You promised us that you could keep us safe.
Yeah, that's what I was.
You made me believe that we could be safe with you." And
brutal
it's just like,
scene. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, dude.
Oh my goodness.
It's gut wrenching. So let's get over to Jake Gyllenhaal.
Well, this is, I think, one of his most underrated performances, and it's interesting. He's in a lot of these thriller type movies now. He was in Zodiac, and he killed it in that movie. And I think he does an exceptional job. And this is why I think you see him being annoyed with the intensity of Hugh Jackman's character. Because every time that they're on screen together, there's tension between them. And that's what's amazing about this movie. It's not just about the tension of these girls getting kidnapped. It's the tension of how these people react with the detective, how the families react with each other, how people are reacting to him torturing. It's all this tension to how they're reacting. And I think Gyllenhaal, when he's on screen with Jackman, is kind of annoyed with him. He's just like, let me do my job, man. But then when he pans the scenes by himself, you can tell that he's empathizing with Jackman's character and that he is following these leads. And you see this intensity, like when he breaks into that guy's house, this registered sex offender, and finds the body. You see an intensity when he is by himself, kind of on these missions, and it's much more of a kind of real character for him. He's not playing a crazy guy; he's playing a really good detective, and I think it's a great performance.
You can tell that he cares not only about his job but about like society. You know,
Yeah.
when he's like originally grabs the guy out of the RV and he's like, "What did you do with those girls?" It's like he doesn't know that those guys took the girls or anything. He got a report that there was a RV that was suspicious.
Yeah.
You know, and he's like,
he kind of acts in the gray a little bit.
yeah, and he's very, very aggressive with it, and I love seeing that passion from the police side of things.
And the passion that he carries when he's off screen with Jackman, because he has to tone it down because he doesn't want their family to get all crazy. But then when he's by himself, he carries that intensity, and I thought he did a great job.
I think so too, and I think that they're the two stars. I mean,
there's no question.
I don't really see anybody else in this movie standing out and acting at all. But I think that these two guys both did an exceptional performance, and that's what made this movie.
I think that's all that needed to be. I think this movie is about them.
Yeah.
And I think the other people are like pawns in the movie, but I think they are the main like chess players in this movie.
Yeah.
So
I think so too, man. I'm not impressed by the mom, or I think the son of Hugh Jackman did a decent job, but man, I think that let's go head towards storyline and plot, man. I think they keep you guessing literally the entire movie.
Oh yeah.
They introduced the what was it, the crazy guy from Dark Knight, whatever. I don't remember his name. Literally the sketchiest looking guy of all time. Plays an incredible bad guy. But they just introduced this guy randomly, and starts off in a foot chase, gets away, and then we find him later. He's like, well, maybe Hugh Jackman is wrong in locking up this other guy. Maybe this other guy is guilty. You know, and they make you question it so much, and then of course he's like literally just belongs in the loony bin.
Did you ever question when they're in the parking lot if he made that up when you heard the guy say they didn't cry until they left or something like that? Did you ever question that?
Yeah, well, I think the guy has apparently an IQ of a 10-year-old, so he could make up whatever he wants and it not be true, and it'd be like okay for him to say that.
Yeah.
So I don't know. But I think they introduce this guy and then they throw in like snakes and blood and like
very creative
trunks
ways
of clothing. It's like you have no idea what's going on. It's basically what's happening.
The mazes, they add layers to the plot in simplistic ways, but ways that the plot never becomes too over colluded or overbearing. It's every scene drives forth with, I think, just enough creativity to keep you guessing and the plot to move forward. And this guy is sometimes criticized for his movies are more stylistic and tension driven, and that they lack in some substance. And I think, once again, this movie, I think, is the perfect setting to drive that with the plot.
Yeah. I totally agree. And I think that, they just keep you guessing the whole time. And what's funny is that all the facts. Like, all the things that Jake Gyllenhaal is about to find out or hasn't found out yet. And you're okay with that. It's not like the inspector's missing something and you're frustrated that he's missing something. It's like, they deliver it in such a way that you're not frustrated, and Jake Gyllenhaal is also not slow in discovering it, and you're excited with him when he discovers things. Like when he figures out, about the abandoned apartment and that kind of thing. It's just like, and when he figures out that Hugh Jackman hasn't been where he said he is and that kind of thing. It's like, it all flows extremely well.
How did you feel in those scenes when he's kind of catching on to Jackman and he's about to catch up with him? Were you rooting for Jackman to stay in secrecy?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I I really want Jake Gyllenhaal to find the daughters, but
Absolutely.
on the same,
Yeah.
on the other side of that coin, it's like I really don't want Hugh Jackman to be a bad guy in this,
Yeah.
and so I mean that brings up an interesting point. I wrote down this question: is was he? You can talk about the morality of it all you want and how subjective that is, but he was kind of right that his girls got kidnapped by this guy, and he just stuck with his gut. I think the way he went about handling it was horrible and extremely illegal. But I think had he not done that, who's to say they would have ever found anything and his daughters would have died?
Well, this is where the movie, I think, and I cannot wait to see where this discussion goes.
Yeah.
So I am on Hugh Jackman's side with this. Especially because I don't think this director was playing tricks when he heard that in the parking lot.
Yeah.
And let's remember that this guy is singing the Batman song from Thanksgiving when he stalks him out.
Yeah.
There is no question in my mind. And I don't think the movie's playing too many questions with us. I think the movie's questioning our morality based on the fact that we know that this guy is guilty.
Yeah.
At least he's involved.
Yeah.
Which it turns out he was. He wasn't the one who necessarily kept them there captive, but he knew about the whole thing. He's very loyal to his aunt.
As well as, choked his dog and...
Yeah, I can't say I would have done anything differently. I think they
make you not like the guy, that's for sure.
Well, I don't think the movie had to make you not like him. Yeah. I don't like the guy to begin with. I'm on the side of Hugh Jackman here, and I thought a lot more about this, and if this guy, and there's a very interesting scene where he's like, when he kidnapped those daughters, he stopped becoming a human being. And I don't know if I'm quite on the line of that, but...
I disagree with that entirely.
Yeah, I disagree with that. But what he did, torturing this guy who he knew had access to his daughter, what else is he supposed to do in this situation?
Yeah.
The cops have given up on this guy, on this lead. He's heard things that they haven't heard, and they don't believe him. I gotta side with him on this. I gotta side with him. I even had a conversation with my girlfriend about this after the movie and the torturing. And, I think that if someone's responsible for kidnapping and killing girls and they have access to that information and there's really no other way to obtain that information, I think a lot of people would be doing the same thing in that situation.
Yeah.
I'm curious your thoughts on it.
I think that's where another element of the religion plays into it.
I think
you got the whole, this super, devout Christian dude.
Yeah.
Is going and kidnapping and beating people to a pulp and,
absolutely.
And revenge and lack of forgiveness. And I think it's almost a commentary on society at that point where it's just like, you've got, almost, and I don't know if this was the director trying to prove this or, the writer, if they're trying to say that, Christians are hypocritical or whatever, but I think that it is such it's such a subjective thing where you've got a super caring, overprotective father that then has his worst nightmare come true, and so it's hard to say what I would do in that situation. I don't think that I would end up I might keep the guy captive, but I don't think I'd beat him up. I might just hold him captive because and kind of play my own jail cell.
Yeah.
Since the police won't do it. But it just begs the question.
What if you're not getting anything out?
What would you do in that situation?
Yeah.
And he wasn't getting anything out of it, even though he did beat him up to a pulp.
He wasn't. And this is where I have a problem with the movie. And I think he set it up perfectly and this is where I think it goes to the name of the movie. This guy is a prisoner of having to protect his family, and it drives him to the lengths that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And even though I agree with what he's doing,
that's a good point.
I think I actually agree with him maybe even a little more than you do with what he's doing and the methods he's doing. So the fact that he is a prisoner to this, protecting his family, and he drives it that far, I wish that the movie would have played where he got information and it led to some kind of conclusion. Because as it turns out in this film, nothing that Jackman does to interrogate this guy, it doesn't lead to the conclusion of the movie. And
other than he goes to
the end.
To the end, yeah.
But he would have gone to the end anyway.
Probably.
So that was my thing with the movie. And I think it would have questioned viewers a lot more because it would have been like, look, he did this,
and it was
he
unnecessary.
found his daughter. Well,
Yeah.
if he found his daughter,
As it currently stands, though, it was unnecessary. Yeah.
But he couldn't have known that.
Yeah.
And I still don't know if you can say it's unnecessary, even though he didn't get anything out of him.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's another moral point. You know, did the ends justify the means?
This movie has a lot to do with morality and
fascinating.
Yeah,
fascinating
yeah,
movie.
so,
There's so many layers to this the emotions.
All right, so let's talk about how that kind of ropes into the ending.
Yeah, I got a lot of thoughts on
I just
this.
thought of something. So, you know, his daughter, he gave his daughter this rape whistle, which is kind of, you know, at the forefront of the movie. You know, it's like the reason that they leave the house on Thanksgiving.
Kind of a red herring.
But also, yeah, absolutely. It's kind of flies under the radar, but is actually kind of important because it saves his life at the end of the movie, or you choose to believe so.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so he's in the pit, and then Jake Gyllenhaal kind of faintly hears this whistle.
Awesome.
And so you know that his daughter found the whistle.
Yeah.
And you know that, you know, she loves the gifts that her father gives her. You know, she cared about going back to her house to play with the whistle, and as well as she found it, and that you can tell that he's so overprotective of his daughter that he gives her, you know, a rape whistle when she's like 8 years old or whatever. But you know, that in his overprotective nature is what actually saved his own life.
This is fascinating because the point I was just
the whistle
driving,
being there when he's at the end.
Yeah, and the point that I was just driving home about him getting nowhere with the interrogation because of his methods to go to the extreme. It played off in that.
Yeah.
And that's actually fascinating. So maybe the whistle had more to do about the morality than the interrogation did. I love that. Yeah. I didn't realize that until you just said it.
Dude, I didn't realize it until like 30 seconds ago.
That's brilliant. Dude.
It just hit me. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the ending.
Yeah,
so,
closure.
So, you know, I'm glancing over at your score, and that was my thing, that the ending was a little bit coincidental. You know, the fact that Gyllenhaal was sent to the aunt's house just because we found the son.
And he didn't even want to go.
He didn't even want to go. I love it when he's in the car getting the daughter back.
Oh, it's amazing.
Great scene. And you see his drive in that scene.
Yeah.
But it's still coincidental how it all comes together. And the aunt doesn't bother not answering the door, injecting this girl when he's banging at the door. It's like she's given up and she just wants to die at that point.
So she kind of throws in the towel. She could have easily locked the doors and been like, you know, I'm not here, you know, whatever. She could have just hidden in the corner and never said anything, and he wouldn't have come in. But the doors are unlocked, and she thinks that they're knocking on the door coming to find her. Because I think she realizes that if Hugh Jackman can figure it out, so can the police.
People have figured it out. So that makes more sense. So she has thrown in the towel.
So I think she's
more
like,
kamikaze.
it's over. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Okay, well, so how did you feel overall about the ending, and how do you feel about it being coincidental?
I think that they tied up all the loose ends. I think that this is such a good wrapping up of a movie, you know, in the fact that the only loose end is Hugh Jackman in the final scene, and then we find him, you know, but you know, we kill off the aunt, we save the two girls.
Yeah,
we
some great closure.
We finally figure out what happened to like the 16 kidnapped boys over the last 30 years.
Some great closure.
The aunt's husband is dead, which we find out, and then you know, crazy guy commits suicide. And then you know, Jake Gyllenhaal basically is like celebrated for solving the case, and then but you also know that. And the little girl is like pumped that Jake Gyllenhaal saved her, and then the mom is reconciling that her husband will probably go to jail as soon as he's taken out.
It's interesting that the other guy didn't go to jail for conspiring with him and torturing.
Yeah, I think that he played such a little role in that, and he was like, "Man, this is wrong. We're not going to stop you." But
I love
and so I don't think that that's like collusion as much as I think legally it would be considered that, but I think that morally. I mean, I don't know what you do in that situation, man.
I agree. So,
but we also don't. No one knows that he was you know, colluding in that. No one knows that Cuba Gooding Jr. was even assisting with that because Hugh Jackman hasn't even been found yet.
That's true, and that guy's not going to be like, "Hey guys, you know, we found my daughter, and I got to tell you that."
I got to tell you that this guy helped me. You know, I doubt he's going to sell him out.
No.
Anyway.
And the ending just got bumped up in my mind because I love the loose ends. I love the whistle. The whistle actually ties into the title and the moral ambiguity of the movie, which is brilliant. just the coincidental factor of it.
Yeah.
But maybe it was supposed to be a coincidental ending. And that only bumped down the ending 1 point from perfect for me. Was that coincidental nature of it?
I gave it a
You
10
loved
out of
it.
10.
You loved it.
Because they tied up all the loose ends, and then you're kind of left hanging like, is Hugh Jackman going to just die alone?
So I've got a question.
Yeah.
So the guy's wearing the maze thing around his neck. Who was the guy in the basement? And how did he connect with the maze people? Of the church. Not the church,
He was the aunt's husband. And
okay.
Yeah. So we're still learning.
I was gonna ask you about that.
No, he is
Sorry,
the aunt's
guys.
husband. So the aunt basically tells, the inspector, whoever, she's like, or when she's talking to Hugh, in some conversation, she's like, yeah, my husband, used to carry snakes and that kind of thing, and he clearly was the leader. He's the one that started the wage war against God, and got the long hair, got the necklace, and then the guy that's dead in the basement, you can tell had long hair and the necklace. And she says that after a fight, her husband left them.
Yeah.
And I think that she doesn't know. She thinks that he legitimately left. She doesn't know that he's tied to a chair and killed by the priest.
It's just kind of gratifying.
Yeah, exactly. So she has no idea. She thinks she was left alone, and I think that's good, and that's why she was more motivated to give up at the end.
I
Because she said that she had to slow things down because her husband left. And, so you wonder, has she even done this? Clearly, like, the Cuba Gooding Jr.'s daughter, like, ran away, was able to escape. So clearly, like, she's not in good enough shape. She's old, can't really do this on her own, especially when her nephew's not there.
Yeah.
And so when the nephew is taken from her, she's all alone, and she can't do any more on her own, really. Right. Without the LSD, Coca-Cola mix or whatever.
That's brilliant. Well, one thing before we rate this movie, one thing I gotta ask you that is part of the conclusion. What do you think about her stance on waging war against God? How that tied in with the faith aspect of the movie, and how ultimately it didn't lose Hugh Jackman's faith.
Dude, I think you made a fantastic point with that, where he's, almost has more faith at the end. Based on what she did, and her intentions were to make people lose their faith.
And this is the thing that I think you wrapped up about the closure that almost is brilliant with the movie. This is such an eerie, dark, gloomy, somewhat depressing movie, but it still has a bright side to it. Yeah. It didn't leave me feeling negative afterwards. And I think a movie like this can really bring you down. And it made me a little bit paranoid. I was about to go to some trails last night in the woods with my girlfriend, and we didn't go. But it didn't. It had positivity to it that I thought was very hard to have an undertone in this movie, and I think a lot of that had to do with the closure.
Yeah.
Well, let's rate this. I'm looking at both of our score sheets here, and we're going to actually make a video on our score sheets.
How our scoring system works and how we have basically taken the Six Sigma engineering solution process to movies.
This guy, yeah.
I know. Anyway, this is where I really nerd out. But we've broken it down into 11 different categories, and it's on a weighted system. And it's, the system is to try to take away as much subjectivity and add as much objectivity to a standardized system.
Yeah.
And so we both come up with our own, out of 100 type scores, and we're going to average them together. So based on that system, I give this movie a 97.18%, which is the first A that I've given.
Insanely high for our review.
And so I think what the point of this system is to not only standardize it so we can compare other movies to each other without any influence on culture or anything else. It's just objective as possible and consistent with us. We're trying to break it down into little elements that aren't affected by our emotions.
Exactly.
And so, dude, I mean, it is nearly impossible to get an A on my scale.
It's very hard.
And what did you give it?
I gave this movie a 93, which is also incredibly high for me.
So
we're averaging a 95.
Average our two scores, and
so we're averaging a
95 out of it, which is fantastic. And if you're watching this with us, I know we basically just ruined the movie for you, but if you haven't seen it, I mean, I highly, highly recommend it. One of my all-time favorite movies. It's a nail-biter. It's gut-wrenching. It will destroy you emotionally for several hours afterward.
Yeah.
And you're really going to contemplate life.
You stay in the movie for a few days after watching it.
Yeah,
You get sucked into that world.
for sure. But yeah, I think the ending is fire, and
Yeah.
I just could not be happier with the way they set up this entire movie and the flow of it and how creative it was.
Cannot wait
We
to
didn't even
see.
say anything about the soundtrack. Soundtrack, fantastic.
And let me mention something
Yeah.
about the soundtrack. I love it. It's got that tense vibe.
Yeah.
It played the chimes a little too much for my taste, the same song, but it went with the movie. The movie didn't have different progressions in the music.
Yeah.
This movie is about sound design, editing, and the way the bass choreographs with the shots. And
This is where surround sound really kicks in.
it's a surround sound movie. It's not a movie that you sit around listening to the soundtrack of,
Yeah.
but it's a movie that the sound design draws you in. And well, guys, this was awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us, and we'll be trying to do this about once a week. And
Stay tuned for Mother.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit worried about that one.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll see you next time. Thanks, guys.